मनुष्य मिस्टेक करूची एक्सेप्ट करूची महामानवर रूप नउची देव और देवता माने मिस्टेक करूचंती तांको मिस्टेक को आइडेंटिफाई करउची सेना पतित बोली कहा जाउची तनो ये जो मानव और दैव संपर्क आको किभଳି भाबरे साधारण पिलाटी बुझी परिबो टिके क्लिष्ट रहिबो मजे कथा कहूची तेणु आपण तक भावुचंती कि जदि पिलाटी स्कूल पिलाटे हाथ में पड़िला टीनेजर पिलाटे हाथ में पड़िला हमर 13 वर्ष 19 वर्ष भितर पढ़िया चाहूची ये लाइब्रेरी को जीवो आपण द स्टोरीज आर वेरी वेल रिटन फॉर ऑल ऑफ यू आम डिस्कस करूचे तार डिफरेंट एस्पेक्ट इंपैक्ट को मुझे पढ़ा आरंभ कली स्टोरीज आर वेरी वेल रिटन वेरी शार्प टू द पॉइंट वेरी वेल एडिटेड आपण देखो पढ़िया को नेबे आपण को लगातार बारंबार पढ़ी पारिबे आ मु मध्ये सत्यार्थ मु कहबी से जेहेतु सिनेमा आ एंटरटेनमेंट वर्ल्ड सहित जोड़ी हेक अछंती यार स्टोरीज यार सीरीज हे पारिबो छोट पिला मानन पई जागी मैडम मध्ये जने टेक एंटरप्रेन्योर आ मीडिया एंटरप्रेन्योर से मध्ये आकू ऐड करि पारिबे यार आ ओडिया ट्रांसलेशन होबा उचित पण एति कहि के तो ऑब्जर्वेशन थिला म आपण को पाहु जाउछी आपण एबे आहि नेडो सेडो गाइछंती चेष्टा करछंती आउ हाँ आमे कोन ये जो ट्रेंड देखुचु जे आमर सभ्यता रे संस्कृति रे गर्वित हबार गोटे समय आसी बा डाकर आसी प्रधानमंत्री मोदी ये समय को वसुधैव कुटुंबकर समय कहिसंती G20 रो प्रेसिडेंट्स को भारत रो समय बेली कहिसंती एवं आम ओडिसा रो संस्कृति और सभ्यता मध्य बहु हजार वर्ष तेणु आपण जने अण ओडिया रो ओडिया ट्रांसफॉर्म होबारे ओडिया साहित्य संस्कृति को अपनाइबारे एवं ओडिसा रो नारी मानन को पई बा झियो मानन को गोटे दृष्टांत प्रस्तुत करिवारे जे भली भाबरे रोल चेष्टा करिसंती ताकू आपण को गोटे कॉन्शियस प्रोसेस थिला ना गोटे एक्सीडेंटल प्रोसेस
ये प्रोसेस सब इज नेवर एक्सीडेंटल इट इज ऑलवेज कॉन्शियस मु कहउची काहे की बिकॉज़ जते बळे मो बाहा हेला मु ओडिसा को आसिली अवश्य यू नो सिंस Satyartha is speaking in English, I should take the liberty of doing the same.
ना आपण ओडिया रखले बहुत खुशी बगिसला
no टिके कहिबी but express करिया पय मते टिके कष्ट होची regular language रे माने regular talking is easier than expressing a particular opinion. So when I came to Odisha, I had, you know, one of the theories I have is I was born and brought up in Andhra, although I'm a Punjabi. So my parents always taught me to learn the local language, that is Telugu. So I can read, write and speak Telugu. But at the same time, they told me not to forget my roots, which is that I must learn Hindi and Punjabi, which is my mother tongue. So not forgetting mother tongue and being able to learn new languages is something that they always told me. So I think having come from that background, when I got married and moved to Odisha, my first objective was how to learn the language and communicate in the language to the people around me. So that was my first objective. But my theory is always that while I learned Telugu because I lived in Andhra and I learned Hindi and Punjabi because it is my mother tongue, I learned Odia for love. So that's my theory always.
आपण सही परिप्रेक्ष्य रे जेतबे कहू हम रिविजिटिंग द रूट्स हम कथा कहू ए बही मध्ये सेठी कनेक्टेड अछि आपण से क्षेत्र देखुचंत ए बही रो कंटेम्पररी प्रासंगिकता कोन आमे एभली बहीटे काहे की लेखिबा अथर जने एभली बहीटे लेखुचंत आपण तांसे उल्टा क्वेश्चन पचारि परिबे तने आर प्रासंगिकता कोन आपण जने महिला उद्योगपति कहिबी ना एंटरप्रेन्योर कहिबी बोथ हां इधर तने से को उत्तर देबे एहार वैल्यू कोन छोटो पिलाटे पे वैल्यू कोन कल्चरल अवेकनिंग पे वैल्यू कोन स्कूल लाइब्रेरी पे वैल्यू कोन आ हमर रूटेडनेस को कनेक्ट करिवार वैल्यू कोन
I believe that it's very important to read for children. Reading is very, very important. In fact, ajikoro dinre apno dekhibe that most children are stuck to television sets. Although I'm in the business of television and I must propagate viewing television, but when it comes to children,
now a television promoter saying read books
for the children. I'm saying young children ought to be reading much more, whether it is about the Puranas or whether
while watching television read.
No, don't watch television and read. Spend more time. So, for instance, when we were children, we were told you can only watch television once a week, and that is on Saturday or Sunday. And fortunately, there weren't too many programs except Doordarshan at that time, so we didn't miss much. It was easy to do. But today the children have so many opportunities on television. They have so much content to consume that they are constantly wanting to watch something or the other. So yes, in today's day and age, it is far more difficult to get children to read. But I think reading should be a very important habit for every child.
Do you reckon reading stories? Did you mean to that? Reading?
Everything. Reading anything is great. Whether it's stories, whether it is fiction, non-fiction, it doesn't matter. It just gives you more knowledge. It gives you more understanding. Recently, I read about a 13-year-old child who has been writing, who's written a murder mystery. So I thought it was very interesting. And so I think so it's not just the Puranas. I think Puranas, of course, is a very important aspect that every child should learn. I myself have been very fascinated by Bhagavad Gita. And talking about Vedas, just want to spend 2 minutes because it's your book launch and, we shouldn't digress from that and go to my life. But let's focus on the book launch. So we started by talking about your book on Sri Devi biography and this book. Then we talked about Vedas. Then we talk about Jugos, which Yugo mein tha. Correct? So my first question would be that you wrote a biography on Sri Devi, which is so different from the mythology. I mean, I'm sorry to use the word mythology, but due to lack of any other word, I have to use it. So, and then you write this mythological. Now, we all know that when a writer writes a book, research is a very important aspect of the book, right? While Sri Devi's biography had a different kind of research, mythology has a different kind of research. Between the two, which one do you think was most daunting?
I'll just add one word there. Mythology can be synonymized with ancient tales, ancient stories. So let's put mythology to rest and give it a proper cover dena hai isko. And Devdutt Patnaik ji proudly says, I'm a mythologist. So anyway, he propagates. We don't agree with him.
No, I do agree with him because like I said, mytho is a very, very misunderstood word, poor thing. But like you said, we can maybe talk about that a bit in this session. To answer your question, Jagi, I think definitely the Sri Devi book, the research for that was a lot more daunting. Because it involved, since she had passed on by then, if she was alive, it would have been probably a much different experience. But since she had passed on, so for me, the process became about meeting everybody that she worked with. So I remember meeting about 70 people that she worked with, both down south and in Bombay, actors, directors, her family. So because then in her absence, they became the voice and they shared the memories that is what the book is all about. So it involved a lot of traveling, also when you're writing about a person's life, it calls for a different kind of caution. It calls for a different kind of respect and reverence. How do you even though she is a public figure, but she was someone who very fiercely guarded her private self from everybody, and I wanted to respect that. So there were a lot of parameters within which I had to write that book. So it was a daunting process. Mahagatha has been an absolute joy, a complete joy, because having said that, even the Puranas, of course, needed for me to give it the same kind of respect and reverence, because this is such a huge part of our culture and heritage.
Very complicated.
And very complicated. And also for me, the most important thing was to make sure that I keep the purity of the stories alive when I'm presenting them to the readers around today, because every story has a soul. So while I might have taken creative liberties in terms of the body of the stories, the soul remains untouched, unvarnished, untainted. I wanted that to be to come across. So it's important for you to nurture that, give it the respect and reverence, and present it that way. So, but the research never felt like a chore, because it was like every day waking up to a new story, a new wisdom, and the Puranas is a fascinating world. I mean, there are stories about, probably everything under the sun is there in it's like an encyclopedia, so that it was a process of absolute joy.
Good. My next, of course, question would be leading to the Vedas we talked about. So you said that Vedas are very different from the Puranas. I don't believe I know much about the Puranas. But whatever little research I did before coming here, I learned that a very important part, that means the 5th of the 18 Puranas, is actually the teaching of Vedas. It's Vedic history. It talks about Vedic history. Talks about Krishna's birth and the history behind that birth, right?
Bhagavad Puran, right?
Bhagavad Puran. So when we talk about Bhagavad Puran being the 5th of the 18 Puranas, when I read this book, I thought that the space, I didn't read the whole book, but I picked up certain chapters which caught my attention. And the chapter on Krishna, where Indra attempts feticide, right? So that caught my attention. And I thought that Krishna got very little space compared to the importance he has, whether it is in Bhagavad Gita or in Bhagavad Purana, right? So Bhagavad Purana per se is all about Krishna. And I thought that you did not do justice in giving that much space to Krishna. And I thought Krishna deserved much more. So...
Okay, so two things there. The concept of creation is something that is there in every Puran. In fact, every Puran has 5 characteristics. It always begins with the concept of creation. That is the first part of every Purana. So cosmology is what every Purana begins with. Now, if the Purana is dedicated to Vishnu, they will say Vishnu created the universe. If those are dedicated to Shiva, they will say Shiva created the universe. If it's a Brahma, then Brahma created the universe. So the Puranas have an internal division. So Puranas like Linga Puran, Shiva Puran are Shiv Puran, are Shiv dedicated. Or you have Padma Puran, that's Brahma Puran, that's Brahma. Or you have Bhagavad Puran, or Kurma Puran, or Varaha Puran, those are Vishnu dedicated. And they all have their own take on who created the cosmos. That is first of all. So creation is there in every Purana, not only in Bhagavad Purana. Also, it was important for me that every god gets an equal space within. So while you might find less of Krishna, but there's so much of Vishnu, and Vishnu and Krishna are actually the same. So Vishnu, Shiva, Krishna, Ganesh, and of course the goddesses. And let's not forget our beautiful and mighty goddesses. In fact, one of the most fascinating things about the Puranas was how the Devi celebrated, how Shakti celebrated. Today, when we talk about gender parity and we are celebrating women achievers like her, the Puranas have been doing that for thousands of years. When there is a Mahishasur, you can only have a Durga.
That is another chapter that caught my attention.
Yes. In fact, many people have loved the story of Swaha. Here, if I can just narrate it very quickly, it's a very short story. So the gods come to Brahma one morning and they say, we are all famished, we are all hungry, we have nothing to eat. And Brahma says, how's that possible? I have created a system where whenever there are yagyas on earth and humans pour oblations into the fire, that's supposed to, Agni will transfer those up here to heaven, and that is your food. So I've created a proper symbiotic system. How come you're famished? Agni says, I don't know. I just don't seem to have the agency to make this transfer possible. So these mighty alpha male gods standing poor things with nothing to eat. And then Brahma says, what do we do? Scratching his 4 heads. Okay, let's create a goddess. And then he creates a goddess who's called Swaha. And Brahma makes a rule that from now on in every yajna, every mantra, every line must end with the word Swaha. Only when the word Swaha is chanted will this food, this havish, reach the heavens and the gods will be fed. That is why when we have mantras and yajnas, every line ends with Swaha. So imagine,
No, I do agree. That's another very interesting chapter, but I have no comments on the chapter. I just loved it, the fact that I loved it. But, just going forward on the Krishna thing, I ain't giving up Krishna, giving up the Krishna part yet. So, one of the other things where Indra attempts feticide, and you have described the history of the birth of Krishna. And you talked about how Krishna's birth was predicted in a different yuga, right? So, are you also suggesting that the Puranas, as a whole, are actually predicting the future or a different yuga that is about to come?
Absolutely. That is what was, again, very fascinating about the Puranas, that they're all interconnected. And every yuga makes predictions about the next yuga. So that is why these stories are like you said, it is in linear format. These are not random stories in a random collection. I was very conscious of the fact that these stories must be narrated in a linear chronological format, where you start with Satya Yuga, then Treta, Dwapar, and finally Kali. Because the way the Brahmanda operates, every story leads to another story. Every cycle leads to another cycle. Like she said, we know about Devaki's losing her 6 sons by Kansa, and we have all hated Kansa for that for years. But if you read Mahagatha, you realize that back in Satya Yuga, a prediction had been made. So a cycle had begun back then, which now gets completed when the 6 sons are killed. So like I said, everything has a cause and effect. So what you read is a narrative. What you read is a journey, which is also why the name Mahagatha, like you were asking why Mahagatha. Because while these are 100 stories, ultimately it's one big story where they're all interconnected, all interlinked, and they take you on a journey across the 4 yugas, which is Mahagatha. Exactly, yeah.
So I'm just curious, in terms of for the next Yuga, what is the prediction?
Kalki is the next big prediction, right?
That's
yes,
right.
Yes. Kalki is the next big prediction. There are many schools of thought. Some say he was born in 1965, already ho chuka hai. He's born in a place called Shambhala, which is supposed to be somewhere in Tibet.
Which is related to destruction.
Which is related to destruction, where he'll come and he will end Kali Yuga and bring back Satya Yuga. But some say that still have thousands of years uske baad hoga. So there are various versions. But Kalki is the next big event as for the Puranas.
Some also say that it is actually very difficult to have Satya Yuga after Kali. They say Satya, Treta, Dwapara, Kali. Dwapara, Treta, again Satya. Reverse. Okay. Because what happens after Kali, we consider Tini Pad Papam, Ekapadam Satya, Punyam. So Teen Pad Pap se Char Pad Punya hona asan nahi hai. You will not be able to make that jump.
How very interesting is that?
You won't be able to make that jump. क्योंकि कली के बाद सत्ययुग नहीं आएगा, द्वापर आएगा. So Krishna is coming again.
Maybe you should also write a book then. Yeah. I didn't know this. Yeah.
So Krishna in what form may not be in the Shankha Chakra Gada Padma in the Narayan form that Krishna could take his Vishwarupam. So may not be in that form. Krishna can be in Guru form, can be human form, can be a female or male form. We don't know. So that is also a different cycle. Now coming back to your periodization, you were highlighting that. Satya, Treta, Dwapara, Kali. And in the goes back and says that Vishnuji reporting, sir. Yes. So my work is done. Now his body, which was Arjuna and others go into Barnet, then he becomes Jagannath. Yes. So the story goes on. Yes. Now, what was my point here? The most important thing that happened in the end of Kali is the birth of Bhagavata Puranam. Bhagavad Puranam. Though in the number dekhibe, Bhagavata Purana number ota kramika sankhya different hai pare. Kintu Vyasadeva je Purana Ashtadasa Purana ko lekhile authare. So he is considered Veda Vyasa. Only the reason that he actually recompiled, not that he was perhaps originator. Now, when he writes the last Purana, that is Bhagavata Puranam. In that, what he says that the test of Bhagavata Purana happens, very interesting. The test of Bhagavata Purana happens, Tara Parikya Hochi, Sukadeva Parikyata Sambada. Suka Parikyata Sambada re, Sukadeva, Jeki Vyasanka Putra, Brahmachari. Brahmachari Sukadeva, Sapta Dinota course Nuchandi. Like Jackie Ma'am and others, we go to IIM to take 3 days course. Executive training program to become a leader. We go to Harvard, we go to Yale, 7 days course. So Sukadev offers a 7 days executive course to Parikyata for Mukti. I think no education institution is offering that. So Satya Dina wrote a Mukti course, Sukadev offer kurchandi. Also Shravanam Mukti Bhavanam. Se kebal kohujandi je kali jugare kon karibo. Se kohujani khali shunibo, tadgata rahibo, tanmaya rahibo, mukti heijibo. मुक्ति रोड अलग बाट दउछन भागवत रे तेनु आपण सेते बात टच करि नाहंती तेनु सुख परीक्षित संवाद इज ए फैसिनेटिंग स्टोरी आ जगन्नाथ दास ताको भारी बढ़िया कि लिखिते बोधे जगन्नाथ दासंकर जो संस्कृत व्यासदेवक रचना को ओडिया करिवार जो दक्षता बोधे बहुत कम लोकम पाखर अछि तेनु मु आपण रिक्वेस्ट करी आउथे तो पढंतु तेनु ए बही पढ़िले आपण जानि परिबे तार जो कनेक्शंस अछि से जगह सुख परीक्षित संवाद आवश्यक. अच्छा लास्ट पॉइंट जे परीक्षितों को शरीर थिबा समय रे तक्षक दंशिब किंतु सेतोल को मुक्ति पाई जाइथिबे कारण कृष्ण नामर सुधावारी सुनि सारला परे आउ परीक्षितों को सर्प दंशनर कष्ट लागिबो नै तांको परे तांकर पुत्र जन्मेंजय सी करुचंती सर्प यज्ञ तक्षक मारण यज्ञ स्वाहा शब्द थला ना तक्षक लुचि जाउछन जाई कोठी ब्रह्मांग पाखरे जन्मेजय कहउछंती ऋषि माने कहला के तक्षक आसुनी आपण बापा को मारथिला जन्मेजय भूल जाइछंती जे बापा मोक्ष हला परे शरीर को मारथिला स्टोरी रे आसुची लास्ट एग्जांपल से कहउछंती आजिकली तार स्टोरी से तो एग्जांपल अछि अमेरिका कहला 9/11 ने जदी आक्रमण हेछि जोठी बिन लादेन थि घुस के मारो तो तक्षक अच्छी इंद्र पाखे ऋषि मान आहुति दौरान से कहले तक्षक आय स्वाहा तक्षक आसु ना इंद्र पछे नुचिकी अच्छी जन्मेजय कहते इंद्र को स्वाहा दियो. Now Janmeja says Indraya Swaha. Now Indra, because mantra re basare devata. So very fascinating story because
is that last story is actually that about how Takshak and Indra
and how devata mane kevali mantra re baso he manisha taku baso kari paribo. Au taku daki kiri mo kamo mo kari paribi. Very fascinating. And mantras are used as scientific modules. A plus B ka whole square kitna hai? A square plus B square 2AB. Like that, I can use devatas for my purposes. And he calls Indraya Swaha. Then Indra runs ki mujhe abhi marna padega. Indra runs to go to Brahma. Then Janmeja says Brahmaya Swaha. Let Brahma be killed because he is giving Osama bin Laden space. Takshak is Osama bin Laden for Janmeja. Usko hi marna padega. It's a very interesting story. Over to you.
No, I think I don't think I can top that. You've just said everything that needs to be said.
I'm saying. I'm saying.
I thought you were making a statement. I didn't know that was a question.
No, I'm saying. Why did you miss the Sukha Parikshita Sambhada?
Right.
And also another thing, there are 24 gurus of Abadhutam. Abadhutam ko 24 guru has a very practical relevance for today. These are two observations.
See, if it was in my hands, I would have loved to make it a Maha Gatha, which would have included everything that you are saying. But there are publishing constraints. There is a word count. There are page constraints. We also needed to have illustrations in the book, and there are constraints within which a book has to be brought out. Even the fact that we have 100 stories, that itself, I think, is a big because in fact today I'm being told that if you had 50 stories each, maybe the book sold even more than what it already is selling. So, but I definitely wanted 100 because it had to be a Mahagatha.
Is there a Mahagatha 2 in line?
Possibly. There possibly might be, because when I created the first list of stories, it was 200 stories. Out of that, this is 100. But these are really the best, the cream of the Puranas, so to speak. So I think so it's just that, there were constraints within which one had to work.
So talking about your second book, I spoke to Satyartha and I said, I'll be very happy to pick up some chapters and make television series out of it. So I'm opening up this question. To all of you who are here, who are writers, that I come from a medium of screenplay. Television is all about screenplay. So stories are fine, but these have to be converted into screenplay. So if any of you are interested in converting this into a fabulous, compelling screenplay, we'll be very happy to take that.
Oh, this is an offer.
Yes, it is an offer.
Too good to resist.
Yes.
Too good to resist. Well, thank you so much. That's a wonderful thought.
Pleasure.
And watching these stories in another form would be wonderful. So I hope that someone actually takes this up.
Hey, Satyarth. So the question is, you said this book is also going to open doors for the young generation. That's the generation maybe after us. Do you see that this book can find its way into the curriculum of education?
Many people have actually been suggesting that this is something that should be made mandatory in schools and colleges. So I would love if that actually happens, because like we have been discussing here, I think there is a lot here that the younger generation would be interested in reading. And of course, the wisdom that the Puranas offer. See, the Puranas offer a wisdom that is very, very relevant even today. It's very futuristic. The Puranas talk about plurality. Today, when in the country, we are being told to stick to one grand narrative in the country, and every other narrative is false or problematic, and there's one grand Hindu narrative. Just see what the Puranas have been telling us all this while. If you see the image of Ardhanarishvara, we all know on a biological level, it is about man and woman coming together to create the universe. But for me, there is a much deeper resonance when I see that image. I just don't see a male and a female. What I actually see is that if there is one thought, it needs to have a counter thought. And only when the two synthesize can there be a new and a third thought, and that is how we evolve. So exactly. So if there is Vad, then there always has to be Vivad. And only then can there be Samvad. So only Vad will not lead you anywhere. Only Vivad will not lead you anywhere. They have to come together. So a lot of things in the Puranas that I think the younger generation can definitely pick up on. And I do hope that it does find its way in, in curriculum as you're proposing.
Hi, Satyartha. My name is Kapila. We met downstairs. I bought your book also. Congratulations to you. Hi, Jackie ma'am. We had met earlier. So I'm a storyteller basically, and I bought this book for my 13-year-old kid because he's a voracious reader. And adding on to Sir's point, what I suggest that I wanted, because I'm more into children's literature, I do storytelling for the adults also, but yes, more I'm confined up to my children, and the students are like teenagers or 3-year-old kids also. So why not, have something like a picture book or an easy language, which can we can inculcate this thing right from the beginning, to have it in an easy language where even a 6-year-old kid can relate to it, what you're talking about.
I would love that, but a problem is a lot of these stories also have a lot of adult content, because this was never meant to be a book for the kids, So there are stories where we have the kind of content which would not be, which is not possible to be explained or told for
maybe not all the stories, but
maybe some of those.
Because
but even then, I still wonder, because of course today we have someone like Sudha Murthy who does that wonderfully. She makes these stories very accessible for kids. So definitely worth a thought, and maybe something that if I could possible. Though I still feel it's a bit difficult
if you
given
catch
the kind
them young,
of content.
it's always good.
Yeah. So hopefully.
Satyarthi, before we go to the message, just 10 seconds. Will that book write only for adults?
Satyarth, my question was like, we are trying to capture a younger audience. My daughter, she looks at only reels. She doesn't, though I've been trying quite hard to, get her into books, it's not working out that easily. And a lot of them are into audiobooks to some extent. But have you thought of taking an extension from her question? Have you thought of having reels of these versions, which is visual appeal, or has, apart from the larger screenplay, which ma'am obviously said she's looking at, there are a lot of people who are addicted to that, but the younger generation has a very short time span in terms of getting the
reels is a good idea, and I think this book I think it will lend itself to a lot of variety of modes and forms and possibilities. In fact, I have been myself putting out reels. I've been taking up short stories and just making a 1-minute reel about what the story is about, and then leaving it on a cliffhanger, hoping that again would,
so maybe the same story, part 1, 2, 3, 4 in reels.
So I have been doing that a lot on my Instagram handle, and those are getting a lot of views, in fact. So maybe she can follow that. But yes, there are different ways of doing reels, and like I said, this book lends itself very easily
because the audience,
all kinds of
your target audience, which
course.
You're trying to catch up,
absolutely,
is too digital nowadays.
Yeah, sure. I hope so. The Marathi already has begun. The Marathi translation has already begun. And the good news is that we have sold the first print in less than 2 months. 5,000 copies have sold out in less than 2 months. So the book is already in reprint. So hopefully the book is...
This is a point. I'm Natasha, and this is a point for both of you to consider, Jagi ma'am and Satyarth. Satyarth's been a screenplay writer for the TV series Porous, which was on Sony TV. So... one of the writers, he was a follow-up writer. Once, I think he joined later. He was not one of the initial screenplay writers, but he was one of the follow-up writers. So, are you both looking at the possibility of tying up together on a TV series where Satyarth may be considered as a screenplay writer? Would you be keen to do that?
We've been discussing that for how many years now, Jagi? Every time I meet Jagi, we have this conversation that let's do something together.